Mary was known in her community as the girl with a big heart. She was not born into wealth, but she was raised by parents who believed that kindness was the greatest treasure a human being could own. And from childhood, she learned how to share even when she had little, how to comfort others even when her own heart was heavy, and how to give without expecting praise. When she met Victor, he was not the handsome prince that young girls dreamed about. He was just a struggling young man. He was tall but thin, with only one pair of trousers and two shirts, one of which was already torn at the collar. And he was even living in a small wooden room where water dripped in whenever it rained. Victor's story was tragic because his father had died early and his mother struggled to raise him and his siblings. So he grew up jumping from one petty job to another, sometimes carrying loads at the markets, sometimes running errands for bricklayers, and sometimes sleeping hungry because he had no work that day. Mary saw him one day when he came to her mother's shop to buy a small cup of garri on credit, and her heart melted when she looked into his tired eyes. And even though her friends laughed at her later, saying, "Mary, is this the man you want to waste your beauty on? He has nothing," she chose him and defended him. She told them he has nothing now, but he has hope. I would stand with him. And truly she did. When they got married, life did not suddenly become sweet. Instead, it became a long road of sacrifice. Mary used her small tailoring shop to feed the family while she made sure Victor went to school. When his fees were due and there was no money, she sold the gold chain her father had given her on her wedding day. And when he needed books, she stayed up late sewing clothes for customers while praying, "God, bless my husband and make him succeed." There were nights she went to bed hungry so he could eat. There were days she patched his only pair of trousers again and again until the fabric looked like Chucky's face. And in all of this, she never complained because she believed her sacrifices would be remembered one day. Mary often reminded him of their dreams in those early days. One night, as they sat together on the flat mat in their small rented room, she leaned on his shoulder and said, "Victor, one day we will have our own house. Our children will run in the compound and we will look back and laugh at these days." Victor squeezed her hand and said, "Mary, if not for you, I don't know if I would survive. I promise you, when I stand, you'll be the queen of my life." However, as time passed, things began to change. Victor finally got a contract through one of Mary's uncles who saw her endless struggles and decided to help them. Fortunately, from there, his life started moving forward. Contracts came, respect came, money began to flow, and slowly, the man who once knelt to thank his wife for a simple plate of beans began to raise his shoulders as if he had made himself. At first, Mary did not notice because she was too busy rejoicing. She would clap her hands and say, "See, Victor, God has answered us. Remember when we shared one egg? Now we can eat a whole chicken." But Victor would reply with a smirk, "Yes, but remember, it is me that goes to work every day. It is me they respect now." One evening, as Mary served him food in their new apartment, she smiled. "Victor, do you remember when we prayed together in that leaking room? Now, see how far we've come. We should always thank God." But Victor dropped his spoon sharply and said, "Mary, must you always remind me of the past? I am the one working now. If not for me, would you even be living in this house?" Mary froze in shock. "Victor, I did not mean to insult you. I only wanted us to remember how God lifted us." But Victor stood up angrily and pushed the chair aside. "Enough! Stop talking as if you carried me here. I am the man and I owe you nothing." Mary sat down quietly on the kitchen floor that night, hugging her knees, the same knees that once bent in prayer for him. And she asked herself how love could turn so quickly into scorn, and why the man she gave everything to was now treating her as if she were nothing. It became bad when Victor started coming home late, and anytime Mary asked, Victor, is everything alright at work? He would snap. Stop monitoring me. Do you think I am a small boy? Then he began to change how he looked. He would buy expensive shirts and perfumes while Mary still wore the same old gowns she had sewn by herself. And even when she teased him, Victor, don't forget your wife, oh, even one new gown will make me happy. Victor would laugh bitterly and say, Mary, must I buy clothes for you? Don't you have hands to walk? If you want new things, go and get them yourself. The words pierced Mary's heart because she remembered the night she had worked her fingers raw on her sewing machine just to buy him second-hand trousers for his first office interview. But now he spoke to her as if she was a beggar. One Saturday afternoon, Mary discovered the full extent of his betrayal. Victor told her he was going for a business meeting in town, and she prepared his shirt and prayed for him as usual. But later that evening, one of her cousins who worked in a restaurant near the junction ran to her breathless saying, Mary, I don't know how to tell you, but I just saw Victor sitting with a young lady, feeding her with his own hands, and he even called her my queen. Mary's heart sank, her knees trembled, but she forced herself to ask calmly, are you sure? Maybe you saw wrongly. But her cousin shook her head. I saw with my 2 eyes. He even bought her wine, the same wine you once told me you couldn't afford for Christmas. That night, when Victor returned home smelling of perfume that was not his wife's own, Mary gathered her courage and asked, Victor, where did you go today? Who is the woman you were with? Victor dropped his keys on the table and stared at her with cold eyes. Mary, don't start. You should be grateful I still keep you in this house. Many men in my position would have sent you away long ago if I spent time with someone else. It is because I deserve it. You have already enjoyed your season. Don't cling to me like I owe you. Mary's lips quivered as tears slid down her cheeks. Victor, do you remember the days when I fed you Gary without sugar? Do you remember how I sold my father's chain to pay your fees? Do you remember how I stayed hungry so you could eat? And now, you stand before me and speak as if I was just a shadow in your past. Victor waved his hands dismissively. Enough with your sermons. I am not interested in the past. The only thing that matters is now. And now, I am not the same man you married. Stop reminding me of my poverty days. I have moved on. From that moment, Mary realized her husband's betrayal was no longer hidden in the darkness. It was happening in broad daylight. He no longer cared about gossips. He no longer cared about her tears, and his arrogance grew bolder every day. Even Mama Mary, her mother, noticed the change. She came one evening and sat with her daughter in the kitchen, watching Mary stir a pot of watery soup. After a moment of silence, she said, my child, I warned you long ago. People tend to forget yesterday and cling to tomorrow. After all you sacrificed, this is what you get? Well, all I can say is for you to watch him closely and carefully. Mary nodded silently. Her eyes were filled with tears and she held her wrapper as if it was the only thing keeping her together. But in her heart, she prayed, God, please, don't let the sacrifices of my life become wasted. If this man cannot see my worth, then let his actions return to him in shame. By now, Victor's pride had grown so tall that it could almost scrape the sky, and he no longer walked like the humble man Mary once married. He was now like a cock that believed the sun rose only because it crowed. To celebrate his so-called success, he decided to throw a grand party in town, inviting businessmen, neighbors, church members, and even local chiefs. He told Mary coldly one evening, make sure you look presentable. I don't want you embarrassing me in front of my guests. Mary's heart squeezed at his words because she remembered when they used to dream of hosting friends in their compound and laughing together over small bowls of amala and ewedu. But now, he spoke to her as if she were an outsider. On the day of the party, Mary dressed in her best attire, and she arrived at the venue holding her head high, even though her heart was beating heavily in her chest. The hall glittered with lights, music was blasting, and people clapped as Victor walked in proudly, shaking hands with guests. When Mary tried to walk beside him, he raised his hand sharply. "No, Mary, you can sit over there," he said, and pointed to a corner table. "The front seat is for people of my level." Some women who heard him covered their mouths in shock. One of them said, "Is this not the same Mary who carried him when he was nothing?" Mary's cheeks burned with shame as she walked slowly to the corner where she sat alone. As the party began, Victor stood up to give a speech. His voice was loud and his chest was puffed out. "Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today as a man who built himself from nothing. I am living proof that with determination, anyone can rise." At those words, Mary's uncle, the very man who had given Victor his first contract, shifted uneasily in his chair. He couldn't hold himself back, so he cleared his throat and stood up. "Victor, I am surprised at what I am hearing. You claim you built yourself? Did you forget who paid your first fees when you could not? Did you forget whose house you ran to when you had no shoes for interviews? Did you forget the woman who sat sewing clothes through the night so you could eat?" The hall went silent. All eyes turned to Victor. His face stiffened and he tried to laugh it all. "Uncle, this is not the place for such stories." But Mary's uncle shook his head firmly. "This is the place, Victor, because you stand there lying in front of witnesses. The truth must be told. If not for Mary's sacrifices, if not for her father's inheritance money she gave you, you would still be running errands in the market. Don't stand there pretending you are a self-made man." People turned to look at Mary, who sat quietly with tears pouring down her face. Women began to shake their heads. So she was the one who built him, and he now humiliates her. Her ungrateful husband. Victor's business partner, who had been negotiating a contract with him, stood up and muttered, "If he can betray his own wife and deny her, how can we trust him with partnerships?" He walked out and soon others followed. Victor's pride crumbled in that moment. He stammered, No, it's not like that. I worked too. But nobody listened. The shame in the hall was louder than his voice. Mary's uncle walked over to her and held her hand, saying, "My daughter, lift your head. You carried this man like a son, and today the whole world has seen his ingratitude." Mary stood slowly, turned to Victor and said in a sharp voice, "Victor, you told me to sit in the corner because I was not your level, but tonight the truth has sat you in shame. Remember this: a man who forgets the person that built him will one day watch his castle fall in front of the same crowd he tried to impress." After that shameful night, nothing was ever the same again in Victor's house. The party that was meant to announce him as a big man became the one that dragged his shame through the mud. And even though Mary returned home with him, she was no longer the same woman who once bent her knees in prayer for him. Something inside her had changed, and she now had a new mind, the kind of mind that made her smile while holding her head high, the kind of mind that made her eat chicken openly in front of her husband and never stretch her hand to offer him even a bone. Unfortunately, Victor's business began to crumble slowly. Contracts were withdrawn, partners avoided him, and neighbors mocked him behind his back. He would leave the house in the morning with his tie hanging loosely, pretending he was still important, but Mary knew the truth. He was running after crumbs and returning home with nothing. Sadly, Victor had no money saved up from the period of his initial contract. One evening, he came back home looking worn out. His shirt was soaked with sweat and his face was pale. He entered the kitchen and saw Mary sitting at the table with a steaming pot of pepper soup bubbling beside her and pieces of chicken floating on it. She devoured the chicken without looking back, breaking the drumsticks and thighs into pieces. When Victor's eyes fell on the food, his stomach growled. He pleaded, "Mary, please let me have some." But Mary looked at him and scoffed. "Victor, the man who said I was not his level should not eat my food. This table is for those who appreciate sacrifice, not those who trample on it. With that, she turned back to her chicken and continued devouring it. Victor swallowed hard and he turned away, muttering to himself. That night, he ate dry garri in the corner while Mary licked her fingers from the rich chicken she had consumed. And from then on, it continued like that. Whenever Mary returned from the market with roasted chicken or fried plantain, she would sit in the parlor and tear the meat with her teeth, smiling and licking her fingers. And Victor would sit on the other side, pretending to read a newspaper, but his eyes would keep drifting to the food. One evening, unable to bear it anymore, he dropped the newspaper and said, "Mary, please, I am sorry for everything. Forgive me, share with me, even if it's a small piece. I'm your husband, remember." Mary looked at him long and hard. Husband? A husband protects, a husband provides, a husband remembers. You abandoned all of that the day you abandoned me in your pride. Victor, you will remain in this marriage, but moving on, you will eat from your own sweat, not from my sacrifice. I gave you everything once and you despised it. Never again. Victor bowed his head in shame, unable to reply. He realized then that his punishment was not physical but emotional. He was to sit in the same house with the woman who had lifted him, to watch her rise again while he shrank, and to know that he could beg for crumbs yet never taste them. And that was how Victor learned the greatest lesson of all, which was that gratitude is the root of love, but ingratitude kills even the strongest marriage. Thank you for watching the story. Kindly share your thoughts about the story with me in the comment section and give the story a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories. Thank you and remain blessed.